And we are now joined on tonight's broadcast of PCA Sim Racing by Porsche factory driver and one of the youngest in the stable, but also maybe one of the fastest, one of the ones with the most potential. Matt Campbell now joins us here on PCA Sim Racing. Matt, good evening and welcome to the broadcast.
Yeah, thank you very much. Evening all.
We know that sim racing's been very, very helpful in a lot of ways, and it was useful before the pandemic even got started. But for you, how does sim racing help you as a driver? What sort of role does it play in your career to just make you a more well-rounded, all-around driver at the end?
Yeah, I think it's really developing and changing quite a lot, especially in the current times. But for sure, when I first got on sim racing, back in around 2012 or so, it was just a good opportunity to get on there, learn some tracks and have a bit of fun with your mates. So it wasn't too serious. Whereas nowadays with sim racing and certainly simulations and the way it's heading, with the Porsche family and the factory, you're really using it to help make the real car go faster. So for sure, we have some fun at home, but we also have some serious toys back in Weissach with Porsche.
Earl was telling us a little bit about those toys, and I think the thing that stuck out to me, at least for him, was that when you all test in Weissach, it's more about learning about the car and running simulations and tests on the car than it might be about learning the tracks. Is it sort of the same way so far as you're concerned? Is it more about car testing the way you see it when you test with Porsche?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I'd like to think we're all pretty up to scratch when it comes to learning new tracks. We usually race car every single week. So, we're pretty in tune in that respect. But certainly, with testing and budget and everything like that, it's quite limited when you want to go and try different things. And especially with the RSR with so many, electronic aids and special features, that we aren't in control of all the time. It's just really cool to be able to try new features, try new things. When we're able to go to the racetrack, we have a rough idea of what it should be doing. It's for a quicker feedback and if that's a good direction or not. But, 90% of the time we can get a good feed on that and actually make a good change, when we get to the racetrack in real.
We've seen the development of all of these rigs, all of these setups, anywhere from the classic desk and clamped wheel to, the multi-million, billion-dollar Euro setups that you see with some of the top teams. But I think ultimately, the core skills are still there. For drivers who are still sort of up and coming through the period, how do you feel like sim racing can sort of help develop you, well-round you, before you get to some of the bigger stages? Because my guess is that you definitely use the sim a little bit just to get a hold of the GT3 and get a really good feel for it as you were coming up through the ranks.
Yeah, I think that's different for everyone. For sure, learning tracks, playing with setups and all that sort of stuff can play a big role. But I think one of the most important things is just self-analysis, finding out how to go quicker yourself. Because, you don't have an engineer telling you what to do, looking into data or anything like that. So, really trying to find out yourself what you can do differently and where you can find the speed. So obviously when you get to a real track, you can understand yourself a little bit more and you can really pick up what you're actually doing in the current time. So I think that's really a good thing for drivers.
I want to dig a little bit further back while we're sort of on that subject, because for those that are aware, obviously you come through the Australian GT3 Cup program. That's really where you made your name and made the waves to get you noticed by Porsche. What sort of role did sim racing play, especially in that period of your career, to help you get acquainted with that car, with the tracks?
Yeah, I think that was hugely important, especially when I made my first step to Europe. Obviously joining Porsche, joining the motorsport program, and coming into the Super Cup, never raced in Europe, never driven on any of the European circuits or anything like that. And Super Cup, you're so limited. I mean, you get one practice, you get one qualifying, and then you're straight into the race. And so it's a compact weekend. If one thing goes wrong in practice, your weekend's basically over. So really making sure that when you get to the racetrack, you're going to be on the pace straight away. Not wasting time trying to find brake markers or anything like that. You've got basically 20 minutes to work it out. And for me, just learning the tracks on the sim. So when I get there in real life, I can feel like I'm really, know the place already, like the back of my hand, but yet I've never been there before.
Are there any cases, any circuits in particular where you have that sort of effect, where you spend a lot of time on the sim trying to figure out a place, and then you get there and you really had the pace? Any places that jump out in particular where sim racing really did help you get acquainted?
Yeah, for sure. There is some tracks that are extremely realistic now, especially with iRacing and the Porsche GT3 Cup. All the tracks, the cars are extremely close, but obviously not all the cars and tracks are available. Where you want to go. So I suppose always the difficult ones are when you go to a street circuit like Monaco or something like that. You can't always press reset when you smash into a wall. So they're always quite difficult, but you always can get rough brake markers and ideas. And they're relatively close, but for sure, iRacing is the best at the moment.
When we talked to Earl, he said that he was in the process of getting a rig out to his farm in New Zealand and trying to find a way to get internet all the way out there so he could at least be racing in some form during these times. What have you been able to do to sort of keep yourself sharp? And I presume you've been hopping on the sim, if not on iRacing, then with Porsche a little bit to stay sharp?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, me and my roommate Jackson Evans, who's the current Porsche Junior at the moment as well. We've been living together in Stuttgart now since last year. Obviously, I've been there for a little bit longer, but middle of last year we finally got the sim sorted, and obviously as soon as this stuff started happening, we were on it flat out. So it's been pretty crazy. So many drivers, so many sessions happening. It's been a lot of fun, but obviously we've got to take it in turns. So we're always fighting over it, but it's a lot of fun. There's a health competition, and I think that's really fueling us for when it all gets started again.
I figured you probably got some favorite combos on the sim yourself. We know that the 911 RSR and then the GT3 are there, and I suppose even the Cayman too. I have to believe you've taken a little bit of time to wheel that around. So, any particular favorite car circuit combos that you've come to take a liking to?
Yeah, I think I've been trying a lot of different stuff lately. Obviously, I've got a lot of time on my hands, and we've been doing a lot of quirky stuff on the sim with a lot of different fun groups. But I've been having a lot of fun doing some Nordschleife races. My last one was VLAN 2 in the Cup with Mento Racing. Obviously, with his time now, they just started a sim team as well on iRacing. So we had our first outing in that, and hopefully I'll be able to do a few more. But, that was my first really... experience in a team event on iRacing, where you're changing drivers and everything like that, which is quite strange. But it's a lot of fun, even having a real world engineer in your ear. So it was quite a different experience, but I was really enjoying it.
I don't think we need to explain to people what kind of a beast that circuit is in particular. Everybody knows how difficult it is. But I presume that it's really giving you a new look at sim racing, especially within this time, that you see how well modeled the tracks are, how well modeled the cars are. That at this stage, I would guess the only major difference is just the feel that you get and the sensation of speed when you're actually moving. So, does that change the way you drive the cars without it? Does it help you become better since you have to learn how to drive without all of that at your disposal? And I think in some ways you have to tweak your approach when you race on the sim as opposed to real life.
Yeah. Look, I think at the moment, obviously with simulations developing, getting better all the time, it's always quite difficult in that respect because, things are always changing. So I think the most difficult thing on the simulation side, getting used to as a driver, is always the time model. It's not necessarily the car or the track or anything like that, but just trying to learn, and I think this is really good for it as well, and the self-analysis coming back into it, is learning how to get the most out of the simulation, the tyre, the car, the setup and everything like that. So, it can be really tricky at times. You got to get your thinking hat on and ask your mates, what they're doing, how they're going quick, and even doing some data as well, which has been really useful for us Porsche drivers at the moment, all working together and, trying to find ways to go faster on the simulator, which at the moment we've got a really good program. We're working together with a sim team, and a lot of us drivers are on there and having some fun during the week in some dedicated practice sessions.
How much do you think of what you've learned in this period is going to translate when you get back to the track? And I think what kind of testament is it to the way the technology has developed over the years that everything becomes more applicable because the program itself is so much more complex and so much more lifelike than it's ever been before?
Yeah, I think that's a hard one to say at the moment. It feels like I've driven a car for a year now. I mean, it's crazy. From going into driving a racing car every single week and then not having anything for 10 weeks possibly. It's quite crazy to think of, but for sure we're doing everything we can, and the simulator is the best thing for us at the moment. Just trying to stay sharp, our hand-eye reflex, and have some fun and talk with mates. I mean, I think that's a really big part about sim racing, and for us as Porsche drivers as well. There's a bunch of us on there. We're all having a really good time, but we're taking it really serious as well. We've got some good group of people around us. We're actually trying to do data. We're trying to do analysis. We're trying to figure out how to go faster on the sim, and just as we would in real life. So, look, I think it's hard to always carry across sometimes, but for sure, we're trying to do the same things on the sim that we want to do in real life. And, for sure, when we get back in real life, hopefully we can be on it straight away as well.
I want to dig a little bit into the 911 RSR since we've been running that car all season long. What sort of things do you notice with the RSR compared to real life, and are there any tips that you can offer at large to the drivers of PCA to try and get the most speed out of that car in particular?
Yeah, well, I think that's a tough one because I'm still trying to figure out how to get speed out of it too. But I'm sure there's a fair few guys in there that can smoke me. But the most challenging thing at the moment, I think, is with the RSR. It is not sliding too much, limiting the sliding, and trying to really look after the tyres, because this is really having a big effect at the moment, I find, with this car in iRacing. So it's a big challenge, just like in real life. You don't want to be sliding too much. Obviously, our big focus is endurance racing, so it carries across as well.
So don't slide the tires and watch the rear brakes in particular, because I know that's what Earl made a big point of when he was on. We turn our attention in the fall to the Cayman. The GT4 is going to be the car that gets the call in the fall series. It'll be the first time ever that PCA has run that car in any of their sim racing series. Have you had the chance to work with the Cayman and the GT4, run it? And is there anything you can say about that in particular?
Yeah, I was actually driving last week with a bunch of drivers, and I think it will really be great racing. It will be close racing. Obviously, we've got some good aids on there, the TC, the ABS. And there's not so much tuning, you can do on the car as well. So it should keep the feel pretty tight, and some great door-to-door racing. But again, with this car, you can really hustle it a little bit more, make it move around. It's less aero dependent, obviously, and it should be a lot of fun. I mean, I'm really enjoying it on iRacing, and I'm sure you guys will as well.
I think the wild thing for me, having had the chance to drive both of those cars myself a little bit between races, is it almost feels like a completely different driving style. You've got so much downforce on the GTLM and so much ability to sort of point it where you need it to go, and it'll sort of do the rest. But like you said, I think the Cayman, you really do have to sort of hustle and throw just because the downforce isn't there. But I almost think that it's a completely different kind of fun, too. They're both excellent in their own ways, but I think it's interesting. And I wonder, do you have any thoughts on how the driving style you use for the GT4 can translate as you sort of work your way up the pylon through to the Cup car and then to the GTLM?
Look, I think they've all got very different characteristics, but the aim behind it all, I think, on iRacing as well, going between these different cars, is always trying to get the most flow out of the car. It's very easy to, for example, overdrive the RSR, or especially the GT4 being a lot more underpowered and doesn't have the aero grip. So just trying to flow the car as much as possible, and really trying to think about in opposite directions. So obviously with the GT4, want to think about the exits as much as possible because it has so little power, whereas the RSR, you try and carry a lot more corner speed, but you want to make sure that you're not going too deep in as well. So I think the characteristics are always very similar, but sometimes you kind of flip them around, but I think they always remain the same, and flow is so important, especially in GT4 car.
Flow and momentum, almost like oval short track racing here in the United States, where it's all about corner exit, all about making sure that you carry speed. Makes a lot of sense the more you think about it. So, Matt, I know there are a lot of people that are behind you, a lot of people that support you. Who do you need to thank at this time for helping you get your feet wet in sim racing as we sort of wait everything out?
Yeah, look, that's a tough one. I've got a few really close mates with me. We all started sim racing at the same time. and we're also sort of starting out in motorsport at the same time as well in Formula Ford. So, a few close mates, we're still online together. Obviously, it's a little bit harder now. They're in Australia and I'm in Germany, so time zone makes things a little bit difficult sometimes, but obviously we've got a lot of time on our hands now too, so I can stay up late and, talk crap with them online and have some fun. But for sure, them guys, they got me into it just as I got them into it at the same time. And, we all are racers at heart. So, for sure, them guys who I started racing with back when I was, 16 or something like that.
Well, Matt, thank you so much for your time, and thanks for enlightening us a little bit more on the role that sim racing plays in your world. And we look forward to watching you when we get back to real life and get back to doing the real thing.
Yeah, thank you very much. Looking forward to it, and hopefully everyone can have a good race in the second race tonight.